I'm James Holder. Welcome to Full Court Football 24. Quite fortunate enough to be joined by former Arseley Town, Cambridge United, Reading, Stoke City, Middlesbrough, Portsmouth, Sheffield United, Oxford United, and Arseley Town star none other than Dave Kitson. How are you, Kits? You all right?
All right, Dave. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I hope everything's been all right for you. What's going on, and it hasn't been too stressful for yourself.
No complaints, buddy. No, not when you see what's going on in the world. No complaints here at this end. No, just hope everyone else is okay and doing well. Thankfully, looks like we might have some light at the end of this tunnel now. And yeah, I reckon we've all learned a lot about each other, haven't we, as we've gone on.
Indeed, it's been testing times and trying times, and like you say, empathy for everyone else out there. I hope they're handling the situation just as well. I'd like to look back a little bit on your footballing journey today. You've had quite a fascinating career, and so many highs and lows as well. I'd like to look back on a little bit of your early childhood today. Could you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where you grew up?
So I grew up in a little town called Letchworth, which is we're famed for being the world's first garden city. That's all we're known for. No, it was a nice place to grow up because it was a North London sort of overspill. Everybody was it's up the A1. Everyone was Tottenham or Arsenal. Football was we were sort of in that generation of just as football really started to come on the tellies in the 80s. So everyone wanted to be a footballer. Everyone I knew, every kid I knew wanted to be a footballer. Everybody played football. Our street where we lived, 36 houses, all the kids played football. So I was really fortunate to have that upbringing. My dad wasn't crazy about football, to be perfectly honest. He watched it, but it wasn't his life. And but I just took to it. I just loved it. Whenever I had a ball, I was far happier when I had a football than when I wasn't.
So what would have been your early memories of playing football then for your first team locally or playing for your school side? How did that initial involvement in the game start?
We all played for a team called North Hearts Celtic. So Letchworth being in Hertfordshire, we were in the North Hearts Celtic. We all played in green. And we all played for them at various age groups. And I was lucky enough to have a very good age group. So I played for them for a few years, and then a team rolled up from Stevenage and trounced us. And I said, right, I'm going to go and play for them. So complete mercenary. I was probably about 13, and I went to Stevenage. And Stevenage was a far tougher place than Letchworth. Stevenage was a big town, and the kids were more streetwise than we were. And I learned a lot. It was hard for me because I was very, very shy, very retiring. I stood out, and I didn't like that. And there was nothing I could do about it. So I kind of just had to step up and get on with it, and that's what I did. So I played for Fairlands for a number of years. We had an amazing side. We had one of the best youth sides in the country. And then it got to that age, like so many of those kids' teams do, when you get to sort of 16, 17, they start to break up. People start to discover other things. They need to get a job. They go on to higher education, whatever. And it kind of just fell apart.
How did that play out for you then? Was there a crossroads in your life where you're thinking at that age, do I try to make a professional career out of football or try to then maybe look at life away from football at that age? What were your options?
Not a lot, to be honest. The options back then weren't, they weren't huge. I wanted to go on to higher education, but it just didn't work out. The A-levels that I wanted, back then, you had to do certain bundles of A-levels. And the ones that I wanted to do at school, they weren't available altogether. So I couldn't do them. These days, you can do whatever you like. But I couldn't do them, so I couldn't continue. And so I got a job. I already had a part-time job in the local supermarket in Sainsbury's, just like everybody did, at the weekends or whatever. And then I thought, well, I'll turn that into full-time work, and then I'll have a serious think about what I'm going to do. And then I met two lads there, two brothers. who are my closest mates still to this day, Lee and Paul Devereux, from a real rough estate in Letchworth, hard as nails, and sort of schooled me a little bit really on life in general, and toughened me up. And then they said to me, "I'll be drinking this pub," which was horrible. But we've got a team. We're putting a team together. You reckon you can play a bit? Come and play for us. So I turned up and I played centre half for them. And I really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I don't think she can hear me. I just met my to become wife at that point. And I was 18, and so when she would come and stay over on Friday night, you know what it's like when you're 18 years old. You're not leaving that bed in the morning for anyone, certainly not for Sunday football. And they used to knock on the door and hammer on the door. They knew I was in there, and I'd be hiding under the bed, you know, with my girlfriend. And but I played more often. They got me to play more often than not and toughened me up a little bit. And then they saw that I was okay. And then they used to they were season ticket holders at a club called Olsey Town. And Olsey Town was famous for winning the FA Vase in 1995. That's the big, which is they're a tiny village, so it was a big deal. They played at Wembley and all of that, and they said, "Oh, they're having their yearly their summer tryouts. Why don't you should go down there?" And because I'm left-footed, and they didn't have anyone who played on the left, I presume this is the only reason. They just stuck me on the left. And I was a very direct player, and I was quite quick back then. So I would just get it cross, you know, defend, get in the way, be a nuisance, score the odd goal. And we were fortunate because that team was excellent. We got to the semi-finals of the FA Vase, and we lost 2-1. I equalised for us, and we lost 2-1. Still to this day, one of my biggest regrets was losing that game, because it was such a small, like I said, such a small village, such a small place, that to do it is quite a remarkable effort. But we lost in the semi-finals. But then our striker, Greg Pike, broke his leg in a pre-season friendly against Stevenage Borough, and they put me up front, and I just started scoring. You know, I just started scoring and didn't stop. And then I was sold to Cambridge United for about 15,000, I think the fee was.
Before we come on to Cambridge United, at what point did you hang up the shelf stacking job? Was it when you signed like semi-pro terms with Arsley? Would you have then knocked that on the head, or would you have been?
No, I was still full time, because Arsley would pay me 30 quid a game and £10 a goal, which I later learned was a chronic piss take compared to what everybody else was on. But I didn't know. Like I say, I was so shy. I was so naive. I never questioned. I just wanted to play football. I never questioned anything like that. So I had a contract with them to play, but we trained 2 evenings a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I had a full-time job with Sainsbury's, so I was able to kind of balance the two. Every now and again, my manager at Sainsbury's would be a prick and say that I had to work Saturday. Just to annoy me, I think, more than anything else, just because he was a horrible bastard. And but I played more games than I missed. And like I said, I started scoring goals, and I got a bit of a reputation for myself as a decent goal scorer in non-league. And if you're young enough, I think in non-league and you're a goal scorer, you don't tend to have about, simply because the fees for buying those kinds of players are so minimal, even to League 2 and League 1 teams, that they can afford to take a chance. And then when you go, you sink or you swim.
Can you remember the scouts coming to watch you? Can you remember, was you aware that things were happening for yourself at the time, or were you in your own kind of bubble with it all?
No, yeah, I had a manager called Nicky Ironton, a great guy. And he really toughened me up. He used to scream and shout at me, and and in the changing rooms. And he used to play he was at QPR for a little while, then he went to Enfield. Those were the days when Enfield were the conference team. And I think they won the conference 3 years in a row. Couldn't go up to what would have been Division 3 at the time because the stadium wasn't, it was old and decrepit, and they couldn't go up, so they stayed there. So a lot of wasted talent there again, not for the first time in football. But he had good pedigree, really good. He was tough as nails, and he started to phone people and say, "You got to come down and see this kid that we've got." And of course, it's at that level. It's they get paid for recommending players that they get signed. They get a drink out of it. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's exactly what happened.
Talk to me about going to Cambridge United for the first time. Everything around your move, and everything that kind of took place around it.
Yeah, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. I hated the players. I hated having a routine. I hated having to be on time. I hated having to do this. I hated having. When I became a footballer, a lot of my freedom got taken away. It did, and that's how it felt to me. And I'd always been a very sort of liberal person who, liked to do what he wanted when he wanted. And I couldn't do that, and that pissed me off. I think a little bit, and I became a sort of not difficult, but just a bit resentful at certain things. So when the older professionals used to bully the younger professionals, they would do that, and they would try and do that with me, and I just wouldn't have it. I just wouldn't have it. See, you saw kids who just crumbled in front of these guys, and what really did it for me was I was better than them, and I showed it on the pitch, and I showed it in training every day, and that used to really give me so much satisfaction, because it used to piss them off, and that made me happy, and really that's what got me through it. That they'd been doing this for years and years and years. It was their job, their livelihood, all they ever wanted to do. And this kid had come in from nowhere, breezed through the door, and just sort of kicked them all in the arse. And they hated it. They absolutely hated it. There was so much jealousy, and I had so much resentment towards them. And it was compounded by the fact that they needed me to score goals. So they had to be nice to me, and they didn't want to be. And I used to get a big kick out of that. So it was a real curious situation to be in. I didn't like them. I didn't like the football banter. I never did. I didn't like that bullying, that picking on youth team players, that making them do stuff just because you could, just because you're an arsehole. And I always vowed that when I got into that situation, I wouldn't be like that. I would help guys like me that came through the door.
Do you think because you came from that non-league background, the players were a bit funny with you? Do you feel that sort of they doubted your ability before knowing you?
Yeah, well, because it wasn't just me. Don't forget. I mean, Cambridge United, particularly Cambridge United, were buying players all the time from non-league. 10 grand here, 15 grand there, £20,000 there, and most of them didn't work, because most of them don't. So they just kind of treated me in the same fashion, I suppose. But in a curious way, it also hardened me. And I was also very lucky to play with a guy called Lionel Perez, who was a goalkeeper. You might have remember, your people watching will remember Lionel Perez probably for one thing and one thing only, when Eric Cantona chipped him at Old Trafford. And it went in off the post, and you just saw Lionel sort of turn around thinking, what the fuck just happened there? That's where you remember Lionel Perez from. But he was a winner. he was a born winner, despite that chip. And he would, in training, I'd never seen anything like it. Well, bear in mind, I'd only been at Cambridge 5 minutes, but I'd never seen a goalkeeper try to rile the strikers in shooting so that they would do better. And he was a phenomenal goalkeeper, so it took a lot to beat him. But you owned your talent and your skill and your craft based on a hatred, not for him, but for what he was doing. He baited us. He baited us in training to do better. And sometimes he would come out on top, and sometimes you would come out on top. And it gave a real nice kind of tension to training. It made it mean something rather than just. I see so many shooting practices, even now, even in the Premier League, where it's just, yeah, okay, this, and I'll try and do this, and it will go over there and no one says anything. I hate that. It's got to mean something. And Lionel brought that out of us as young strikers, which we all, by that time, were all young strikers. And he made me a better player, and he made me a better human being, most importantly, as well. He turned me into a winner.
You scored so many goals at your time at the club that you've got sort of club legend status amongst the fans there. Did you feel at the time that the respect from the players and the fans was going up with every time you produced on the pitch?
Yeah, well, I was fortunate because Cambridge had a long line of strikers, proven strikers. And so in my position particularly, I believe that, everyone loves a striker who scores goals. It's the first thing on the page 1 of Football Manual, and so for me, scoring the goals, I was merely following in the footsteps of guys like Dion Dublin, Martin Butler, Trevor Benjamin, who went to Leicester. And these guys had obviously been given the time by the fans to do well. And so they knew that if they kind of backed me and they saw enough in me, there was no reason why I couldn't be one of those as well. So they were kind of I believe they gave me a little bit. If I miscontrolled something, it wasn't a big deal. But more often than not, I wouldn't. If I missed, it was because I was learning my craft. But luckily for me, more often than not, I didn't. So they were great with me. And then I had a manager in John Beck and then John Taylor who always said the right things about me. Always said, look, they were always very honest with the fans. They said, this is a kid who we think is going to break our transfer record, which at that time I think was £2 million. Trevor Benjamin, I think, had gone to Leicester or Norwich. I can't remember, but he'd gone for a lot of money, scored a lot of goals, and gone for a lot of money. And they were saying, look, this is a guy that's going to break our transfer record. You stick with him. He's going to go, but enjoy him while he's here. They were saying all the right things, and I was reading them, getting more and more confidence from it. And then ITV Digital collapsed. And that was a big, big problem because much like now, League One and League Two relied on that money from ITV Digital. And when it collapsed, everyone was in the ship. And there was a fire sale of players. And our chairman at the time, it was one of those times where you don't see it so often now, but the buckets were being passed around the stadium, people putting money in, that kind of thing. And the chairman said, if we can raise, I think it was 50 grand, if we can raise 50 grand, we won't have to sell Dave Kitson. So the fans threw money in, raised the money in no time. Next week, they sold me. And then he tried to say that I'd asked to go, that I wasn't happy. So I called a guy called Randall Butt, great name, Randall Butt, chief sports writer for the Cambridge Evening News. And nice guy, not with us anymore, but good guy. And I said, Randall, listen, I just want to set this record straight. I didn't say that. I would never say that. It's ridiculous. Um, I regret leaving in the way that I have, but I had no. They told me I had no choice. They had to take the money, otherwise Cambridge was going to go to the wall. What am I supposed to do? So they used me as put me in between the owners and the fans. But the fans, like you say, the fans respected me and appreciated the goals and the effort and the commitment that I'd shown on the pitch. So they were on my side. So that after the interview broke, before the next home game, the chairman decided to go on the pitch, in his infinite wisdom, go on the pitch with the microphone and address the fans. And I think he got as far as hello before the whole of shit from all over Cambridge rained down on him, and they heckled him off and booed him off. And I'm only sorry I never saw it, but I heard all about it. And he left a short while after. But then by that time, I was at Reading and I was looking at the next challenge.
Reading paid initial 150k for you to bring you to the club.
Yeah.
Move from your point of view. How did you initially settle into Reading? How did you initially get on with your teammates and everything that goes along with a new move?
Yeah, well, I got, I had to get over that initial bit first. Like you say, 150 grand was like chicken feed for Cambridge and for Reading, because Cambridge were expecting, or the fans were expecting, this 2 million quid, and they got 150 grand. And it left just a bitter taste in everyone's mouth there. And at Reading, Nick Hammond, the director of football at Reading, was kind of, thank God for ITV Digital going bust, 150 grand. When I got there, we had Nicky Forster, who was all right. I didn't like him that much, but he was a very selfish striker, which you get selfish strikers. He was good, but we had him, and I felt his career was at Reading was coming to an end. Sean Gota, the loveliest man in football, taught me so much that I'm forever grateful for. Took me under his wing. Did some things in training that were outrageous. I think they're still trying to unscrew Graham Murty out of the ground in one corner of the training ground for a piece of skill that he did. I've never seen anyone do it before or since. Sean Gota and Lloyd Owusu. And Lloydie was a great guy. Lloydie was a great guy. Great guy. Knew his strengths, knew his weaknesses. But the biggest plus for me was that Steve Coppell was the manager. And Steve Coppell used to be a winger. And Steve Coppell decided that his teams were going to play forward and wide quickly. And at the moment the ball went forward and wide, the ball would come into the box. If we couldn't play forward and wide, the ball would come into me, and I would get it wide and spin into the box. I only had to remember two things. That's all I had to remember. So I had plenty of time to defend from the front as well because of that. And I just tackled and kicked and headed and punched and elbowed anything that moved. And then when the ball would come to me, I'd get it wide, I'd get in the box, and invariably I'd get on the end of it. But there were big changes there. That first season that I got there, I played about 8 games. But the next season, I started the season with Nicky Forster. I finished top scorer. Nicky Forster's Reading career had come to an end. John Solarco, Sean Gota, A.D. Williams, our captain, Steve Brown, loads of people went out. And what was left was a young, real hungry, real energetic, and critically underpaid team. So, and I think that's a big it's a big talking point. It sounds a bit funny, but underpaying these really young, hungry players made them desperate to put themselves on the map. And Reading was an unfashionable side. It wasn't a West Ham, who were in the league with us, who we would beat. It didn't have that cachet to it. And so no one really paid any attention to us. And Coppell used to say, don't, you know, he hated us talking to the media, hated it. So I was his worst nightmare, really. But he hated us, he hated drawing attention to ourselves as a club. You just like to go under the radar, which on the one hand, if you're me, you're thinking, well, I want people to see me. You know, now I'm here doing well, you know, the shyness has gone and I'm here to do business and I want people to see it. But he didn't want that. So there were never any sort of positive noises that came out of Reading, look at us, look what we're doing. We just sailed under the radar. I think we had 2 consecutive 7th place finishes, which was tough because we were good enough to get into the playoffs at least. And I think I finished top scorer in both of those seasons. And then the following season, that's when things really happened for us. Something incredible happened in Berkshire the following year, and that was then when all hell broke loose, which was great.
What do you think was the difference from that start of that pre-season? I know you've got the nucleus of that young squad, but was there 1 or 2 players you think brought you in that pushed you guys over the edge? Because that season you finished with 106 points, absolutely blitzed the league, yourself on fantastic form as well. What do you put it down to from changing it from 7th to 7th to then absolutely blitzing it?
We kept adding these young, hungry, underpaid players that people really weren't batting an eyelid about. No one was looking for them. At that time, the Championship was all about trying to sign fringe players from Premier League sides if you were going to go up. You know, whereas we were doing it the other way around. We were signing players that were going to be with us for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and they were going to carry this club forward. Obviously, we didn't expect it to happen in the way it did, but the arrival of Kevin Doyle was huge. We had myself, Leroy Lita, and we needed another striker. And this kid from Ireland turned up, Kevin Doyle, and everyone was like, who the hell is this? 75 grand from Cork. Who is he? And he started training, and I saw in that first training session, I was on one side, he was on the other side, and he would get the ball and turn and run, and we'd never had that before. And it was every time he got the ball, get the ball, turn, run, and it would go wide, or he would shoot, or he would get brought down, and the whole team was able to get up the pitch. And he brought with him Shane Long. And Shane Long came because Brian McDermott told me that Shane Long came because Kevin would need some company, and Shane Long was his mate, and we may as well have him. He's more of a hurler, cracking hurling player. By all accounts, a top-grade hurling player. But he was 17, 18, and, you know, stick him in the youth team and leave him there for Kevin to have a pal. And obviously Shane Long became a great player, but that was later. But he did start, he was so quick. And we had, so at that time, then we had myself, Kevin Doyle, Shane Long, and Leroy Lita. And if you're going to get promoted out of the Championship, that's probably the best 4 strikers you can have, because they all did different things. You know, all of them had different attributes and different things. But in credit to Steve was always, if you're fit and you're playing well, you'll keep the shirt. Yes, please, thank you. And and then there was another player actually it was a few more. We signed Bobby Convey from Washington DC United, and Stephen Hunt. So that was the left taken care of, and Stephen was obviously Irish, so that helped Kevin as well. I mean, they were so close that I think Stephen ended up marrying Kevin's cousin, and something like that. So they had their own little group, which was great for them. They were all happy. And on the right, we had probably the best player never to play for England, who was Glenn Little. And Glenn Little used to do things that belied his appearance and his physique. Glenn could take on players. He had every type of cross in the book. He was intelligent, and Steve Coppell got him to work. He got him to work hard and defend, because we all defend. Everybody defended. We defended from the front. Everybody defended from the front. And he got Glenn to do that. So we had a team that was never out-battled, never beaten, and was bloody skillful. And most importantly, hungry. Really, really hungry. We finally had a squad of players that were underpaid, young, and really, really hungry to get to the Premier League and put themselves on the map. And those ingredients and the way Steve made us play, I would have had us down to get promoted, but not in the way that it happened. And especially not after we got beat on the opening day of the season. We lost to Plymouth on the opening day of the season, 2-1, 2-0, 2-1, something like that. And we're like, what? You know, they're shit. What's happened? And I call this now, my theory is these rogue opening day results. And I used to argue something rotten with Wally Downs about, because Wally liked to bet, and I used to, on the coach, every year there would be a rogue result, and I'd say it only happened on the opening day of the season. Well, never ever happen during the season. Oh, you don't know anything about fucking football. Generally speaking, that's because he just lost a 50 or something. But you get them opening day results. Never bet on the opening day ever. And then we went 33 games unbeaten, I think, after that. And it was just. I mean, you've got to remember, you know, we had guys like Nicky Shorey, the best left back by a mile. We had Graham Murty, the best right back by a mile. We had the best strike force by a mile. We had Steve Sidwell and James Harper, the best midfield pairing by a mile. And we had the best leader, the best two leaders, which was Marcus Hanneman and Ivar Ingemarson. And thanks. And if those two played, chances are you wouldn't lose. You'd already won based on what they were saying in the changing room. Ivar's the best player I played with, not because he was a skillful individual or anything like that, because he just gave the confidence, just exuded that quiet confidence throughout the team. And for what he did in the changing room, it was never a panic. Nothing was ever a panic. You know, he just relaxed everyone and he said the right things. And, you know, Graham Murty was obviously the captain who picked up the trophy at the end of the season, but Ivar and Marcus were probably more like captains for us in that season.
After you've gone 30 games unbeaten, was there anything that Steve Coppell did, like after such a momentous run? Would he have given you guys extra time off, or was it just business as normal?
No. Everyone was just focused. Even while we were ripping up trees, it was still, don't talk to the press. Don't draw attention to ourselves. Don't, you know. And there is a part of us, I talk about this sometimes with Ivar, not that either of us particularly care, it's just a curious thing that came out of that particular season, which was, you know, if a West Ham or a Leeds had done that, it would be, you know, everyone would have noticed. I still think that you can ask people what the championship record is, who the players were. Nobody knows. Not really. I don't think many people know anything about it. And it was never shouted in. It was shouted about by the fans, obviously, but by the club, it was never shouted about. You know, even when the anniversaries come round, we don't really do anything for it. In fact, I only found out that it was when it was 10 years. I only found out because somebody randomly messaged me on Instagram. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. Nobody cared. which is fine. It's just a curious thing when I look back. You think something that big for a club that's not necessarily in the public eye doesn't really ever get mentioned, which I suppose is quite a good thing, because you don't want that hanging over the next team and the team after that and the team after that. You know, every team in a generation has to be able to perform on its own merits. I think there's a lot of clubs who suffer from, certainly Man United have suffered from that in recent years. Yeah, and that, so then we won promotion, and we played our first ever top flight game. You know, Reading had never been in the top league, and they're one of the oldest clubs in the world, and so I think it was, I don't know, something like their first top flight game ever, which was 120 odd years, 25 years or something like that. And we were 2-0 down in about 20 minutes to Middlesbrough.
Before we get into the Middlesbrough game, which has quite a special place of sort of in history in your career as well, for good and bad, I'd like to talk about the celebrations with Reading when you guys won the league.
Yeah.
How the city sort of reacted at the time to what is such a big deal, and still the record number of points in the championship.
Celebrations, yeah. My best mates at the club were Ivar Ingemarson and James Harper and Bobby Convey. And I spoke to Harps yesterday, actually. Harps sent me he's funny because I hadn't spoken to Harps for about a year, and I just got a voice note from him saying, "Ledge, I was just driving along in my car. Do you remember at Crewe?" "No." We were messing around on the halfway line, and you said, "Look at this, I'm going to hit the crossbar." And you hit this shot, and it was going right for the crossbar. But even better than that, it flew over the bar and hit that fella right in the boat. It's like, no, Harps, I don't remember that at all. And he's like, you can hear him driving along, pissing himself, laughing. And he's one of those guys, Harps, like Ivar, like Bobby Convey, like Marcus Hanneman. I could pick the phone up right now, and we'd be back 10 years ago, just as we were. They're not all like that. I don't get on with everybody, but certainly those guys, yeah. And so after the game was QPR. So it was the last day of the season to break the record, and we were playing QPR, and we played shit. I think I scored the opening goal. Then QPR equalised, and then we got the dodgiest penalty decision ever in the last sort of 3-4 minutes. And this is to break the record, and I'm on penalties. So this at home, full Medeski Stadium, sold out. You know, so you're either going to go down as an absolute legend, or everything you've done is going to be undermined by this penalty miss coming up. Fortunately, Graham Murty, the captain, was the only player who hadn't scored, the only outfield player in the entire squad, taking into account all the cup games and everything, the only player in the entire squad that hadn't scored. So Graham stepped up with the ball as the captain. I still get goosebumps and tingles thinking about this. You know, we'd won the league, obviously, and we pissed it, but this is to break the points record, and he's the captain, and he hasn't scored. And there's 2 minutes to go. And he steps up, and he absolutely levered this ball into the top corner, and sprinted off. And he told Selby, the kitman / mascot, the guy in the lion outfit, he told Selby that if he scored, he was going to run after him and rugby tackle him. Don't know why. So the celebration that you can see after that is this lion running the other way, and about 11 players legging after him, and I think his head came off and all sorts. Probably little kids crying and all sorts of stuff. He just it got bundled, and then there's a big pitch invasion after the game, and we went up and we lifted the trophy on the pitch. Then we went up, and John Medeski very kindly let us open one bottle of Bucks Fizz to spray. It was typical Reading, you know. It's like no one prepared for anything. You know, don't touch the champagne; it's too expensive. Fucking hell, John, we just won you 150 million quid, mate. You must have a few bottles. Like they say, they rustled up some bottles from some corporate kitchen on the other side of the stadium, while we're all standing with all the fans there, looking like a bunch of idiots. Like we haven't got anything. And then these bottles materialised. We're about 5 bottles of very ordinary champagne. That got fizzed in about 2 seconds, and we had all the photos and everything. And then got changed. My mum and dad were there, and then we went in the hotel that's bolted onto the stadium at Medeski. Downstairs, there's a big open atrium with a bar at one end, and all the fans were in there chanting. And I was trying to slip out the back, you know, and I ended up stumbling upon the highest concentration of Reading fans anywhere on the globe. With my medal and my mum and dad, and I got halfway down these stairs and someone spotted me and they started singing my chant at me, and my mum started crying, and it was just amazing. I should have retired right there and then, because it never really got any better than that. And then we went home. I did get a little bit better actually, because we went to Ivar and Gimarson's house, where we had a hot tub with a load of Icelandic ladies and all the rest of it. So that was, it didn't get any better. I should have retired after that. That was the highlight of the day, probably. You know, we had Brynjar's. I remember Brynjar Gunnarsson's father was over, and he was playing Queen, "We Are the Champions." The horrible cliche, you know, at full whack in the middle of this Ivar's house, in the middle of this street, everyone going, "Will you fucking keep it down?" And he's, yeah. So that was I remember that night vividly. It was fantastic.
Over the pre-season, no doubt excited now to become a Premier League player. What goes through your mind? Are you thinking, I'm going to get an improved contract here? Are you thinking, I really want to prove myself at the highest division of football? How do you adapt and take it in your stride, sort of thing?
Well, it was because it was gradual. You know, it was a gradual thing. It wasn't like someone that just dropped you into the Premier League. You were ready for it. We had earned our opportunity to be there, and it was all any of us wanted. Most of us were mid-20s, and it was our chance to have a go, and we did. We had some very they I didn't have anything to do with it. They had some great results. Did us all really proud. Finished 8th, but I didn't see many games that, so I got injured on the opening day of the season.
And the opening day of the season against Middlesbrough, you scored the club's first goal in top flight football, which is quite an emotional thing for anyone and a great record to have. But it must have been hugely disappointing suffering the injury that you did in the same game. Can you talk me through that game from your point of view?
There's only a couple of things I can remember. I remember Middlesbrough getting a free kick. Mark Viduka had white boots on. So I looked down and said, "Mark, your boots are fucking awful." And he said, "I don't care. They pay me to wear them." I said, "They're still fucking awful." And then the free kick whizzed past me. Marcus dropped it and they scored. But anyway, we hadn't played badly. And we weren't even overawed. It wasn't like the experience was getting to us. We'd played well. And Middlesbrough just hit the second goal was awful. The first goal, long cross, I think down in volley. The first goal was a great goal. But it had come out of nowhere. It was just a long ball to the back post, down and volleyed it, 1-0. Then the free kick was not a great free kick. Marcus spilled it, and I think, yeah, Cooper, I think, put it in. But we sort of rallied. I remember us looking around thinking, these are shit. We're miles better than this team. We are miles better than this all over the pitch. And don't panic, but things will turn. And I felt it was only a matter of time before we scored. And we got some good play down the left. The ball, it went into the box and came out the other side. Sol Ki-hyun, who we'd signed from Wolves for £1.5 million. Great play. The hardest shot you've ever seen in your life. Got to the touchline, and Steve Coppell used to say, when you get so close to the goal, the byline, unless you're out on the wing to cross it. If you're close in, hit the ball across the area, low and hard. He used to call it violence. So in training, if anyone found themselves in that position, he would scream, "Violence, violence," and they'd smash the ball across the box as hard as they could. And that's what happened. And he remembered, he smashed it across, it hit someone's leg, Julio Arca's leg or someone's leg, and he just dropped right in front of me. And I just poked it in with my left foot. It's the worst goal you'll ever see in your life, but probably the most important in the history of the club. It was awful. About 3 minutes later, Ivar Ingemarson was down the left wing. I don't know what he was doing. I have to ask him. Cut the ball back, and Steve Sidwell came running onto it and swept it into the corner. And a minute after that, we got the ball down the right. It got crossed in. And if Kevin Doyle had my feet, size 12, we would have been 3-2 up. So Middlesbrough are all over the place, and they need to take the sting out of the game because they're just being overrun. And unfortunately, I happened to be on the end of that. The ball dropped out of the sky on the halfway line. I controlled it and went to turn in one movement. And I controlled it and turned, and I was going to play it out wide. And just as I turned, Chris Riggott came flying in, sort of like that, at knee height, and just destroyed my knee. It just did everything, just every single ligament, everything, just destroyed it in one go. And that was it. I was never the same player again. And I think I maybe played the last few games of the season. But yeah, I felt really hard done by. I'd had 3 seasons at Reading, finished top scorer every year. Just scored the first goal. And I was thinking, in my head, I was going to finish top scorer in the Premier League. Now, I might not have done, but it can be done. Jamie Vardy's done it. Someone has to be. But I in my head, that season, the Premier League season, was to me an extension of the last season. I don't felt like I had a break. I felt like I was just going to keep playing. That's how it felt to me. I can't remember whether maybe there was a tournament. There might have been I think there was a World Cup. So I never felt like I had a holiday or been away. I felt like football had been continuous for me, and I picked up where I left off. That's how I felt physically and mentally. I knew I was going to have a great season, but unfortunately, it finished after about half an hour.
Do you still hold a grudge against Chris for that tackle? Is it something that you've thought about since then?
I did for years, yeah. Yeah, I did for a long time, because it was a horrendous tackle, and completely out of context in the game, and just it just felt so fucking unfair. You'd done all that, got the club to this. I felt like Reading was my club. I felt like if there was a spokesman off the pitch, I felt like I was a spokesman on it. I felt I'd been there for as long as anyone. I felt like when I went into battle, I felt like I was leading the team. The team were following me onto the pitch. That's how I felt. And when it happened, I just thought, it just seemed so fucking cruel and unfair. And it took me ages to get over it. And this is a very cynical ploy that football clubs do, is that they position the rehabilitation room smack bang opposite the training pitch, so you can sit there and watch every single fucker training every day while you can't even walk. I don't know whether they do it to incentivize you to get back quick, but I can tell you, and any footballer that's watching this will be nodding, going, "Yeah." There is nothing worse than being injured and watching the team training. It's worse than the games. Watching the team training and watching all the lads laugh doing the circle and nutmegging somebody in the circle, you feel like shit. It feels like the end of the world. I just wanted to pack up, move abroad, and forget that I'd ever played football. But I couldn't do that, unfortunately. So I had to crack on.
How long did the rehabilitation phase take? Because I presume you got back toward the end of that season. I know it's disappointing for yourself to miss your first Premier League campaign after scoring on your Premier League debut. So how long did the whole rehabilitation phase take for yourself?
I'm not sure. So the first game would have been, mid-August, and I don't remember. I think maybe I may have made a sub-appearance against Wigan, and then I think I started the Newcastle game. And the only reason I remember that is because Michael Owen had done, it must have been a World Cup year, because remember Michael Owen did his cruciate for England in a game. Might have been against Sweden. And we both came back in the same game. So we both, so I remember saying, "How's your knee? You know, how did you find this?" Did you having a conversation about our knee? And it was both of that. So it was billed as Michael Owen's great comeback, you know. And we came back and we beat them, and I managed to scored a pretty good goal. And I ran over to the fans, because the fans were always good to me at Reading, and I loved them. And I always tried to, whenever I scored, I always tried to run that way towards the crazier fans. I think they're Y26 or Y27 or something. That's the section they all stand in or sit in. And I always used to try and run that way, always. In this particular goal, I ran that way and jumped into them, and I got some great pictures just jumping into them, and that meant a lot, because that was a lot of pent up frustration, a lot of emotion, and so it was nice to be able to celebrate that with them as well, and catch a little bit of what had been for the rest of the lads a fantastic season.
Leon Knight once told me that when he played under Steve Coppell, Steve would come up to him and whisper in his ear, "Violence." Did you ever experience that from Steve Coppell?
No, because Steve and I had a quite a unique relationship. When I got to Reading, Steve had asked me. When I first got to Reading, I turned up in a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and a scarf, like one of these little fashionable scarves. And the only reason I did that is because I was like, well, I've never joined a big club before. You know, what do you wear? What are you supposed to do? And on the back page, that day on the back page was Hernan Crespo had just signed for Chelsea. And he was wearing jeans and a t-shirt and a little fashionable scarf. Bearing in mind, he's cool as fuck and a lot better than I was. But I thought, that'll do. You know, that's fine. He's never, ever let me forget it. Ever. He always mentions it. This guy turned up, blah, 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 blah. We knew he was a bit different. So he said to me, I don't think Steve knew what to do with me, how to talk to me. He asked me, and I was with Steve, they were doing a tour of the stadium. Me, Steve, and John Wasty. And John was telling me about how much Reading means and about how he bought this club for nothing and he turned it into this and all that. And I really could not have given a shit. And Steve was going, you know, this is what I want to do. This is what. And they said, right, what number do you want? I went, I don't care. Just give me a number and let's get on with it. So I got number 12. I wish I'd have asked now. So I got number 12, and then Medeski went off to do whatever he did. And Steve said, so how do I need to deal with you? I've spoken to your manager back at Cambridge, and he says you're a bit different. What do I need to do? Do I need to give you a kick in the arse, or do you need an arm around you? What do I need to do? I said, just leave me alone. Tell me how you want us to play, and leave me alone. And he did. And I think in the 5 years that I was at Reading, Steve and I had no more than half a dozen conversations. And I'm not talking about the stuff where, on the training pitch, get, that's different. In the changing room, Kits, I need you to do a bit more of this, or Kits, try this, or or Glenn, when you get to the ball, Kits, that's all, But in terms of outside of good morning, nothing. No, hardly ever spoke to each other. Just the way I liked it. Just leave me alone and let me get on with it. And that's what we did, and it worked for us.
At this stage, you're now kind of an established Premier League player coming into your second season in the Premier League. Are you starting to see players who have been on maybe bigger incomes and have more lavish lifestyles around the club and around the Premier League? And how are you handling that and taking to that?
No, I didn't care. I never cared about that. I suppose I wish I had now. I suppose every player wishes they'd have cared a little bit more about money at one time or another in their career. But I had a good agent who I believed when he said this is the best deal on the table, and I believe that now. I had no designs to move club. I had no desire to be an arsehole, dig my heels in, go on a Bosman. Never entered my head, not once. I loved Reading. I had a lovely house, lovely wife who looked after me and everything around us. I could see the stadium from my back garden, and I was 5 minutes to the training ground out the front. I had everything that you could want as any footballer, let alone a Premier League footballer. Anything that you could want. Not materialistically, just everything was in the right place, doing what it was supposed to be doing. So going into the second season, we'd finished 8th, and I never looked around ever, and because I knew that I was probably the highest earner there, and I wanted everyone else to be happy. So when I had lads coming to me saying, "Oh, I've got this contract. How much did you ask for? Or how much did you get?" I just tell them. I never embellished it. I never lied. I just said, "Look, this is what I got. You should ask for this. You should ask for blah, blah, blah." Because they were my friends by that point. 5 years living together in each other's pockets. They're not just teammates at that point. They become. I've been at clubs where you've had teammates for a year and whatever. But some of these guys were friends still to this day. So I wanted all of them to be happy. I just felt the happier they are, the better it will be for all of us.
Start of the second season, your first game is Manchester United. What goes through your mind as a player when you look at the fixture schedule and you think, we've got Manchester United first game?
3 points.
Really?
Yeah, 3 points easy.
So you're thinking like first day, going to shock them crazy results and stuff.
Just like Steve said, it's Steve's set up to beat everybody. Now, there's a fine line between setting up to draw and setting up to win. When you've got when you're about to play a team on the opening day of the season, and keep in mind what I said about rogue results on the opening day of the season,
Yeah.
you're very likely to catch a team cold. And Steve knew that. Steve knew we could get something out of that game. I felt it. Everybody felt it. But that was a special team. You know, that was Van der Sar, Vidic, Evra, Rio Ferdinand, Scholes, Carrick, Giggs, Ronaldo, Tevez, Rooney. You know, that's a special team. Think they either were European champions or just about to become European champions. And they were awesome. Plus, they had the best player in the world in Paul Scholes. So it was going to be difficult. So we worked on it all week. And our big plan was to man Ronaldo. And we did that by, I don't know whether Doob said this, but we did it by putting Michael Dubry on Ronaldo. And for anybody who cares about this sort of thing, if you want to see how a man marking job is done, watch Michael Dubry marking Ronaldo. Ronaldo did not have a kick. I swear he almost cried at one point. He was on the touchline. Dubes went through and took the ball, took everything. Great tackle. He looked like he was going to cry. Awesome player though he is. There is nothing worse than when you've got this bee buzzing around you and you just can't get rid of it. And that's what Dubes was that day. He was the best man marking job I've ever seen in my life. And we drew 0-0. And we were good for it. And we could have won. Equally, they could have, because Paul Scholes, the best player in the world, missed a header in the last seconds of the game, which I was watching on a TV in the dressing room, having been sent off about 5 minutes before. Good start to the season.
Was it one of the quickest sending offs in Premier League history?
It's the quickest sending off by a substitute or for a substitute. I think it beat Steven Gerrard's, also on Man United, by about 2 seconds. Not something I'm particularly proud of. Not deliberate. Literally just tried to block Evra from clearing the ball down the line. Got there a bit late. Evra kicked the bottom of my foot, I think. I haven't seen it back, but that's how I remember it. It's entirely possible that that's not the case, that I caught him. But no malice, 1 foot, just literally trying to block the ball from going down the wing. And Rob Styles, who's a colossal tosspot, gave me... You won't find a player who likes Rob Styles. Yeah, I don't think you'll find a referee who respects Rob Styles. Worst referee we've ever had. He gave just straight, didn't even think about it, straight red. And I just remember the first thing that came into my head was, that's the sort of red card you get at Old Trafford. Maybe I should have been a little bit wiser than I was, but I'd only just come on. I was impetuous. It's Man United opening day of the season. We're holding on here for a 0-0. I think I can score if I get one chance. Just a bum decision, you know, and I had to sit out the next 3 games, which again, then having missed out the last season, I then sit out 3 games and watched the lads do really, really well. I think they won the next 2 out of 3. So that pissed me off.
Is it frustrating, as you know, Coppell, once you've got the shirt and you're in the team, having missed 3 games, you have to work actually harder to get back in?
Yeah, it was horrible because I had to walk past Steve. You know, if you're going to get sent off at Old Trafford, do it at the end where the tunnel is. You know, don't do it right off in the opposite corner. By the time I got there, bloody hell, it was a fairly fiery affair. And I remember walking past Steve and I sort of just glanced at him and he wasn't even looking. He was just looking dead ahead. And he didn't have to tell me what he thought. And the lads came in and I apologised. Steve, I think, I can't remember what Steve said. I don't think he said anything, which is worse, because it's like, you know, when your dad says to you, you know, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. It's worse It's one of those. It's one of those. You know, it's just when he doesn't say anything, it's worse because he just let you sit on the coach all the way, like just stewing all the way. You can just feel the rest of the lads' eyes burning into you on the way. But I mean, if they'd have lost, it would have been horrendous. But the fact that they drew, it cushioned it cushioned that sort of feeling that I had that I'd let them down a bit.
How long did it take you to get back into the starting lineup that season? And how long do you think it took to gain his trust again as well?
I don't remember. I mean, I always had Steve's trust. Any player can make a mistake. There's no doubt that getting sent off propelled me to do better. And so I really don't remember much about that season because some bad things happened, in that season. And unfortunately, they're the things I remember. But I remember I was a top English goal scorer. I think I had 10 and Rooney had 8 and someone else had something else. Can't remember who the top goal scorer in the Premier League was, but I was doing really well. And there was an England team about to be picked. And I got a phone call from David Walsh, who's the chief sports writer for the Sunday Times. David's been been a dear friend for years. Lovely guy. Anyone who doesn't know David Walsh is the guy that pursued Lance Armstrong for 13 years and brought him down and proved that he was doped. So he was a very well-respected journalist and he's a great friend. And if David calls you, it means he knows something. So I don't remember anything about the games leading up. I remember a few of the goals. I don't remember anything else about between the sending off and the phone call with David Walsh. I don't remember anything in between that first half of the season. Don't remember any of the games. Probably just on autopilot, just trying to prove to Steve that I was still the main man, that he could trust me. So when David Walsh died, I remember around Christmas time, there was an England squad about to be picked anyway. David says, I've seen the preliminary list of the England squad and you're in it. Can I have an interview because I'm the Sunday papers and I'll have it before the tabloids on the Monday get hold of it. So it'll be an exclusive. So I say, sure. So I do the interview over the phone and then I go out to play a game of snooker with my mate because I like snooker. I'm a huge snooker fan. So I went to the Rileys on Oxford Road and I start playing and I was having a couple of drinks and then I got into an argument with a girl behind the bar serving me. Can't even remember what it was about. And the owner was sat at the end of the bar and he fired her on the spot. And I felt terrible. I was like, no, come on, it was my fault. You know, it was blah, blah, blah. I think she'd been on the phone or something while she should have been working and serving and people were trying to get drinks and people were trying to pay for tables. And it was like, you know, for God's sake, where is her? And she'd been on the phone to her boyfriend. And so I'd said, you know, God, can we actually pay? Can we pay for the table? And so he then came in and fired her. And I was like, no, it's all right. You know, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. I tried to sort it out anyway. Wasn't having any of it. And she stayed in the bar watching me play snooker, which I thought was a bit weird. Anyway, then I then drove my mate home, dropped him off, and then drove home. And on my drive was half of Thames Valley Police Force. Like, there were about 4 cop cars there. And as I got out of the car, I said, what's happened? I thought someone had broken into somewhere. In my head, I'm thinking, someone's broken in, so there's a burglary. Hope, you know, my wife, who's heavily pregnant at this point with our first child, she comes to the door, and they've got the cuffs on me over the bar. They said, oh, I'm arresting you on suspicion of drink driving. So I, you know, are you talking about? I've just been at the snooker hall. Anyway, she'd phoned the police and told them that I was absolutely smashed and all the rest of it. So I'm like, no, I'm not doing any, not doing any breathalyzer tests. I didn't realise that you had to. I thought, don't do anything, call the lawyer, get this sorted out. This is ridiculous. So I got there, and the charge sheet was it. They knew exactly who I was. They'd sent everyone. The charge sheet was enormous. They said to me, resisting arrest, a fray. There was loads of shit on there. And I said, so what is this? Like, what the fuck are you not doing? If you admit to this one, we'll drop all the others. Or what is it? I was drink driving. So I haven't been drink driving. Did the test, clean, no problem. It's too late because you didn't do it at the scene of the. Honestly, and it turned out to be this little copper who had a real hard on for us. When we got to the Premier League, before that, never any problems, nothing at all. When we got to the Premier League, they used to put a cop car outside our training ground every day. And they caught everyone on their phone at least once, which you shouldn't do, obviously, but it's quite busy. And they used to tail Leroy Lita around in his Hummer around town, just seeing if he did anything he shouldn't be doing. They followed all of us. Once we got to the Premier League, we became big targets. And I said, this is bullshit. And so I got to the lawyer, and the lawyer said, I know you didn't know, but you should have done it at the scene. You have to do it. If you don't do it, that's an offence. I didn't know that. I said, what about the test afterwards? It's completely clean. No, it's too late by then. They're only doing that to see if you can go home. So I'm like, well, what should we do? Well, you just got to plead guilty. I said, well, I'm not guilty anyway. This went back and forth for ages. When he persuaded me, he said, look, in the end, just plead guilty. Let the media have their he kept saying, let them have their pound of flesh, which really upset me. I really didn't like that turn of phrase at all. Really bothered me. I had to tell him to stop saying that. He said, look, let the media do what they're going to do, and plead guilty and get on with your life. So that's what I did. And then David Walsh rang and said, you're not in the England team anymore. Been dropped. So I'm like, great. So that was the closest I ever came to playing for England, unfortunately. So yeah, you made for a good book one day.
It's crazy how one random crossword with someone can then lead to such a bizarre turn of events, which cost you potentially a place in the England team.
It cost me everything. I still believe, because I couldn't score after that, because I just couldn't get it together on the pitch. It cost Reading their Premier League survival, cost me my career at Reading, cost me my England career, cost a lot of players their Premier League careers, just all off the back of that one decision. So I completely blame myself for everything that happened after that. For all the good that I did, that one little argument had an effect on an entire town, people's jobs, people's livelihoods. And when you get relegated and you start seeing your friends carrying boxes out because they've been sacked, there's no worse feeling in the world. Absolutely no worse feeling.
I'm guessing you've gone from such a feel-good factor, excuse me, at Reading in the city, to then the exact opposite of that, with, like you said, redundancies, relegations, friends losing their so-called their livelihood and stuff.
Yeah, and it's I don't know really. I try not to think about it, as you can probably tell, because for about, when was this, 2008 maybe, I don't know, 2007, 2008. I would have to tell you, for a good 7-8 years after that, I can honestly say, hand on heart, there wasn't a single day that I didn't think about it. And these days, I probably think about it once a week. But I sometimes say to Claire, my wife, it's, I just wish I didn't, some days, a lot of days, when I'm feeling quite down, I just think, I just wish I'd never played football. I just wish I'd never, ever gone anywhere near it. I just think if I could have just stayed stacking shelves and playing non-league football and being quite happy and never knowing all of this shit that you have to go through. And it's true with football, professional football. They don't just let you play football. They don't just let you play it. You have to give over a piece of your soul. You have to, you got to work for it. And when you come out of it, I don't think I know many people. Well, that's a lie. With the exception of Eva Ingemarson, who seems very happy to be out of it. Well, I don't know many people who are happier and better off mentally for having played football. I'm certainly not happier for having played football. No, there's no way.
How did you handle that, dealing with the relegation in the summer after? I know it's something that's played on your mind since, but how did you handle it at the time? How did you refocus your goals, your energies, and your targets?
I felt that I was completely washed up as a football player. I didn't want to play football anymore. I just felt so depressed, because take everything else, just take it down to a very simple equation. I worked since I was a kid to play in the Premier League. I get there and then I get relegated. That wasn't a part of the plan. I'd always had a plan before that point. And when that happened, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. And I just thought, that wasn't meant to happen. So I just blamed myself, and I still do to this day. And I just remember feeling like in a hole. We didn't go out anyway. I don't know where she is, but Claire will tell you. When I devoted myself to football every day. We went out probably in 5 years in Reading, no more than 10 times for a meal together, or to go to we never went to the cinema. Maximum. I never ever went out, ever. Apart from probably that one day, go and play snooker with my friend. And but we never went out. I totally devoted myself to the game. But then after that, I just had this real feeling of fucking hell. You do all of that, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't work. You sacrifice all of that, and it still doesn't work. And I just thought, I've had enough of this. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to feel this way anymore. But then my agent called, as agents tend to do, and said, Reading have got to sell players. This could be bullshit. I really don't think it was. Reading have got to sell players, and they are asking for offers for you. So I said, right. I said, have you asked if I can stay? He said, well, you can stay, but the thing is, your wages get cut in half when you get relegated. Your wages get cut in half. And I was quite overexposed on some properties that I had, some deadlines that I couldn't meet for constructions that were coming up that I couldn't get the deposit together for. And he's like, look, this is a clean way out for you. And I said, no, I don't want to leave. I don't want to go anywhere. If we all stay together, we'll go back up. We've got by far and away the best team. We've done it once, we'll do it again. Anyway, that didn't come to pass. So I ended up going, choosing between Aston Villa, Hull and Stoke, and then Sunderland. Roy Keane came in on the last hour of transfer deadline day, I think it was, which is when a really good agent has your back. Because I'm sat in the boardroom at Stoke, my phone goes in my pocket, it's Roy Keane, and Roy says, you haven't signed it, have you? I said, no, not yet. So I sort of nudging my agent, take the phone, Roy Keane, do what he wants. And this is where your agent earns his money, because he was absolutely right. if I'd have left that boardroom, I had a contract sat in front of me, 3 years, 30 grand a week, and Roy Keane's on the phone saying, don't sign it, come up to Sunderland. Bearing in mind the transfer deadline is ticking down now. And he says, Dave, what's going to happen if you go to Sunderland? He says, you'll go to Sunderland, Stoke will take this contract off the table and rip it up. You'll get to Sunderland. Roy Keane will know that they've ripped up this contract. He will know that Sunderland are the only game in town, and they'll offer you 20 grand. And a week. You'll say no, and you'll come back down to Stoke. And what are Stoke going to do? Now Stoke know that they're the only game in town, so they'll offer you 15. Take it or leave it. He said, take the contract that's on the table. The best and worst advice I've ever had in my life. Best, he's absolutely right. Worst, what happened at Stoke was a disaster. So, but he earned his money that day, I have to say. It was a very, very good piece of advice.